Could you regret putting too much money into the 401k? This is a conversation that I actually had a little bit earlier today. Putting a lot or putting 20, 30, 40% of your income, capping out that 401k contributions every single year doesn't make sense to be doing this. And how much and what is the drawback from over investing into your investment account? Now, of course, the big one for this, putting a lot of money into a 401k over an extended amount of time, and I'm talking 20, 30 years, with the growth factor of there, depending how it is invested, you could see a really, really large 401k balance, which means all of the tax benefit that you were hoping to write off if you're doing a traditional methodology, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. But putting all of your money in there is putting kind of all of the eggs in one basket, only having the diversification of investing in only that 401k. But the nest egg can actually get to a point where you can be required to take RMDs in the future, and those RMDs can put you into a much higher tax bracket or the exact same tax bracket that you were in. So essentially, I was kind of looking around this. I was playing with an RMD calculator where if you get to the point where, let's say your 401k has roughly $3 million. Now, I know that is a really big balance over the extended life and the growth factor of the 401k. But if you're making regular contributions, if you're capping that thing out, and even if you're putting money into different avenues like IRAs, things like that, you could get to the point where you could actually be required to take those required minimum distributions in the first year on a $3 million portfolio. You're talking about pulling around $120,000 out of that portfolio. Now, of course, this is only for one individual. If you do have a spouse and you're both required to take RMDs, could really amplify that tax bracket, which is what I'm kind of thinking about. And overall, we have toned down the contributions into our 401k to use other methods instead of maxing it out in the entirety, which again, it seems like there is a little bit of downside to over investing. Now, of course, when you think of the 401k plan, if you have to do any early withdrawals, if you have to take everything out, if you have to remove anything out of there, there can be a lot of penalties if you're not old enough to take money out, or if you're taking it out prematurely, you're going to have to pay your ordinary tax income on that. Even when you're retired, of course, this can be tens of thousands of dollars a year, depending on the balance, if you're taking money out of that when you're doing withdrawals. They are estimated currently losing about 25% of each 401k distribution to federal and state tax. So when you think of the double kind of the taxation, both the federal level and the state level, that is a lot of taxes. So if I'm at the point with an RMD where I have to take $100,000 out of that RMD every single year with the tax bracket of 25%, I'm essentially taking out my RMD of $100,000. I am only seeing 75,000 of that. 25,000 is going right to Uncle Sam. It is going right to pay the taxes, which of course, when you start looking at retirement, let's say you start taking these RMDs at 73, you live a full long life, you're 100 years old. Guess what? You had 27 years that you've been paying taxes on this money every single year, which is kind of crazy. And of course, the mandatory withdrawals are what kind of get people. And this is the reason, again, I'm going to show you and really walk through the scenarios and the ones that we're looking at and how we're really building this when it comes to a 401k. Now, the big drawback that we see, of course, is the flexibility and being required to access funds once you hit that age 72, which I believe now it is going to 73 with those RMDs. And again, whether you need the money or not, you're going to have to take the money. You're going to have to pay taxes on the money. Even if you're taking those withdrawals and reinvesting them, you are going to have to leave it, which means you're going to be missing out on the compounding effect that we see. And of course, that is the eighth wonder of the world. When it comes to compounding, you could leave the funds in there. You could give it a couple more years to compound. However, at age 73, you are required and mandated by the IRS to take money out. Now, of course, it might not be beneficial when you're taking money out. If we are seeing a lot of stock market volatility, thinking back a couple years where the stock market was down 22, 23%, then you're pulling your 100,000 out of there for that RMD. This can really be and learn a hard lesson when you're accessing your funds when the market is down, 25%. Then you do your RMD, which of course is going to be a little bit less because the value is less, but that is based on the previous year. But when you take your RMD, now you have to pay taxes on top of the market being down 20%, which of course can be kind of crazy. Now, for me personally, the way that we're doing this is we do not want everything tied up into a 401k. So when we think of our financial order of operations, looking at a 401k contributions, getting the matching contribution is the base. For instance, my employer does 7%. I put in 7%. That is my base contribution. You at least want to get that base. You want to get the the maximum amount that you can pull out of that 7% or out of your employer match. And of course, this is built as part of your compensation package. If you're not putting money into that 401k, if you're not making regular contributions, you are leaving part of your paycheck, you're leaving part of the compensation package that your company offers on the table. Now, of course, with this, when you're putting it in there, then we start looking at HSAs. If you're eligible for an HSA, this is a triple tax advantage account. That is the reason why, again, we do the 401k up to the matching. Then we start looking at our HSAs. Then we look at the possibilities of doing IRAs. And then, of course, once we're done with that, once we do that base match, then we start looking at the Roth variation. So, of course, I'm really planning, and the way that I've kind of mapped it out is when I look at my contributions, if I'm putting, let's say, 30% into my portfolio, I want roughly 30% of that to go into a traditional, that is going into a tax advantage account, that is going into a traditional 401k. On the other side of that, I have 70% of my contributions that are going into the Roth variant up until the 401k maximum that we're allowed. Now, this is going to vary depending on your financial situation, and it's also going to vary and really dependent on what ETFs, what bonds, what stocks, what your 401k provider has to offer in your portfolio. A lot of people will be better off just putting and doing the matching. Again, let's say it's at 7% in that 401k, taking the rest of their money, doing something like a Roth IRA or doing something like a traditional brokerage account because they do not offer and they do not have a great lineup in the 401k, or they charge an exorbitant amount of fees. I have seen this as well, where you have monthly fees, you have annual fees, you have maintenance fees, you have a lot of fees that are eating into all of your contributions, which you have to be very aware of. Also, when it comes to 401ks, a lot of times some of the money can be incredibly difficult to get through and really get to in the case of an emergency. Might take a while to get funds that are needed, where for me, having a traditional brokerage account just on the side, I have money that I can have access to, honestly, almost same day. I can sell the same day that I can move the funds. Funds are available in my bank account the next day. So if I do need liquidity, if I do need availability to funds, does make it a lot easier when it comes to having those traditional brokerage accounts. But again, there are a lot of 401k rules. There's a lot of different ways. So my thought though is putting only that 30% into the traditional or 401k with that contribution. That is going to be the part that I'm going to be required to take RMDs. That is the part that I want to keep my income during retirement under a certain tax bracket to really make it beneficial. So for instance, right now, if we're in that 25% tax bracket, being in an 18% tax bracket during retirement is essentially going to save me that 6%. But you also have to remember in calculating in the growth. So if I'm putting in X amount of dollars every single year and I'm seeing roughly 8 to 10% growth, what is it going to look like in 30 years with that nest egg ballooning to a point through contributions and through the growth factor? How much am I going to have to take out in RMDs? So I might even have to adjust it, tone it back a little bit. And of course, I do work with a tax advisor. I have a financial advisor. I have a lot of individuals being in the financial industry myself that I do have access to. And of course, you do as well. There's a lot of places that offer a lot of financial education and counseling absolutely for free. You can sit down with a financial advisor. A lot of it is free. Tax advisors, usually not, haven't found many free ones of those, but overall you can come up with a big plan. So when you get into retirement, it is about diversifying your income sources in retirement, having some in that 401k, having some in the HSA, looking at the money we have in IRAs, also looking at company stock that we do hold that is personally held, but also looking at the traditional brokerage accounts. Then we have money in high yield savings accounts, also have a couple CDs out there. So when you think of diversifying the income stream, we have a lot of different ways to take it. And ultimately, once we get to the point of taking Social Security, then we have those traditional 401ks. That is going to be the income to supplement us through all of retirement when we're required to take them RMDs. And on the other side, when it comes to the money we have in savings, when it comes to the Roth variant, that is the money that we are growing, and it's going to compound all the time. That it's really during retirement. We're going to see a big compounding factor as it continues to grow. That is what we're going to be using as generational wealth. That is what is going to be passed to our heirs. And that is the plan that my wife and I do have and we came up with. Been working incredibly well. We're working really towards it every single day, living the debt-free journey. The only thing we have left in a couple more years on the house, we are completely debt-free, even looking at getting a new vehicle, which in that case, we don't want to finance it. We don't want, 4, 5, 6% interest. We want to go ahead and pay for it, just pay for it cash, be done with it. Then we own it outright. It is free and clear in its entirety, not paying interest, because there's really two kind of people. One is you have one side where you're paying interest, money's leaving your bank account, you're paying your mortgage, your credit cards, you're paying your debt, you're paying for your auto loans, you're paying for everything over an extended amount of time, which costs a lot of money. The flip side of that is you have a lot of money invested, you have it in CDs, savings accounts, you have it in the market, it's earning you money, it's generating income. And guess what? I am not paying out when it comes to really paying out a lot of money in interest. I do not do it at all, even on my home loan. Really on the fence with keeping the house or just investing all the money instead of paying it off faster, because we are at 2.5% interest. So it does make a really big difference on how much and what kind of return that we can see that is higher than that 2.5%. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.